Hey everybody, Eric Schweitzer here for The Gamer. Today we're taking a look at No Rest for the Wicked, a new action RPG from Moon Studios. They are best known for the Ori series, and this is a very different game than Ori, so there isn't necessarily a lot of crossover between that Metroidvania style game and this kind of brutal action RPG, but I think you will find some stylistic similarities and some things that they have in common once we get into it. As far as the story goes, this is takes place in 841, and the king has died, and meanwhile a pestilence is sweeping across the nation, turning people into mutant monster guys that are very scary. The new king, Magnus, and this lady who represents the church are sending holy warriors to an island called Isola Sacra to fight the pestilence. You're one of these mystical holy warriors. You're called a Serum. Before we get into the gameplay, this is an early build of No Rest for the Wicked. It's going to be an early access game that launches in April. So if you notice some frame drops or some hitches here and there, we're just going to roll with it, okay? All right, let's get to the gameplay. So you start the game pretty much naked and shipwrecked on this beach, just like any good action RPG, but there's quite a few things that make this one unique in the sort of isometric Diablo-like genre. Mainly that this is what they describe as a precision action RPG, meaning that it has a lot more involved combat system. It's stamina based. It's very Dark Souls influenced, and I'm sorry to go there right away, but it probably won't be the last time I compare it to Dark Souls. So between the inventory system, the weapons, the build crafting, and all that stuff, it has a lot in common with that kind of third-person brutal RPG, but it's just from this isometric Diablo-style point of view, which is pretty interesting. It starts out very difficult, I found, largely because your stamina is tied both to dodging and to using your weapons. So you'll only be able to get a few hits in before you run out of energy, and then you don't have the energy to even dodge away from attacks. So you have to be very careful about how you engage. It's a lot of bursts and then backing away, at least early on with the limited tools that I had available to me. I found a pair of daggers pretty quickly and had sort of a light armor build going. And your armor rating has a lot to do with how you move around, how quickly you move, how you're able to dodge, whether you roll, whether you kind of like shoulder charge into enemies and knock them over. So here I already have my daggers, and I use these daggers for most of the demo. The demo is about an hour long and takes you up to the first boss fight with this big mutant monster, and then into the main town, which is kind of the hub. But yeah, it's a very like familiar point of view, and it looks like every other Diablo clone you've played before, but the way it handles is so much different. You really have to be careful about how you engage with enemies. You have this backstab attack here, which I think I blow on the first attempt, and this guy gets me, but then you'll see me be more successful in the second attempt. So if you just unload on a guy like I just did, you'll just be out of stamina, and then you can't get away. You can parry, but the timing is so precise. I really had a hard time nailing that down and being able to do it consistently, because these enemies don't really have much of a tell, not much of a wind-up. Yeah, he took me out so quickly. So let's see if I can get this backstab on the second try here. The counter system, you have to be precise with your timing, both when they hit and when you press that button to counter. And it's incredibly effective. It's just not an easy move to pull off. Later on, you can get shields, which you can use to block, but that will drain your stamina. So it's all about sort of managing your different resources, your stamina, your energy. You can't just go ballistic hitting guys, because you'll run out of energy, and then you'll just leave yourself completely open to being counterattacked. So let me skip ahead to when I fight this guy successfully. Okay, so here I'll do the backstab correctly, and you can see it chunks off a good 60% of his health, and then it's pretty easy for me to finish him off, even though he gets a few hits in still. I want to talk a little bit about the art style here, because I did mention that you will see some Ori DNA in No Rest for the Wicked, and I think that this sort of painterly art style does have some shades of Ori in it, though that game is fantasy and very colorful, and this game is much more grimdark. Like, they definitely have their own unique visual identity. I think that the attention to detail, I guess, you can see in both games. You can see they definitely came from the same studio. Inventory management's a big part of it, and you'll see a lot of the stuff that I'm picking up early on here are crafting materials. That's not something I got to experience a lot of here in the demo, but I know that crafting weapons and upgrading weapons, as well as, gear and runes is a big part of it. And I'll talk about runes in a second after we look at this level up menu. So every time you level up, you get 3 points you can put into any of these categories. At first, I wasn't sure what the difference between stamina and focus is, but focus is your meter that you build up to use these magic attacks, these like runic attacks. Every weapon has different runes, and you can apply new runes to give them new attacks. So when you build up that focus meter, you can unleash these special attacks. For these double daggers, it's like this dash attack. But then every weapon has their own kind of different things. There's a staff that you can use to shoot fireballs, and it seems like that's going to be a big part of the customization of gear, is like slotting in different runes and unlocking new attacks to use. And it's all based on that focus meter that you have to sort of build up, kind of like a rage meter, before you can use those attacks. I'm going to skip forward just a little bit because I got stuck trying to figure out how to get into this tower for a little bit. So let's move ahead. Right, so I talked a little bit about the crafting materials. There is some shades of survival crafting here. Throughout the demo, I picked up a bunch of gathering tools. I got a shovel for digging, I got a fishing rod, an axe for chopping down trees, a pickaxe, and you use all those tools to collect resources as you explore the world. And all that stuff was kind of giving me V-Rising vibes, which is, this isometric action RPG, but heavily in the survival crafting side. This one, I don't think is so much into that. There's no base building as far as I could tell. I think that you buy a house and you can decorate it and you can craft things to decorate it, but I don't think you're like building a base from scratch from tiles like V-Rising. There's also not really any survival stuff. You don't have to eat or stay hydrated. You don't have to worry about the elements. So it's not, I don't think that it has much by way of survival games, but what it does have is gear crafting, like I said, and also food crafting, which is your health and buff system. Rather than some kind of Estus flask that you have to refill at campsites, you'll actually go to campsites and use your ingredients that you've gathered to make food. Food will have different healing properties, but will also have different buffs too. They can make you stronger, raise your defense, that kind of thing. That's kind of interesting, and you can customize what goes into your quick slots to eat mid-combat. So, some of these fights, I was having to back off and eat a lot. And some food will like refill your focus right away, so you can use your runes more often. That kind of thing. I'm trying to sneak up on this guy, get a sneak attack in. I think I pulled it off, yeah. Yeah, so there is a little bit of element of stealth to it too, right? Because these sneak attacks just like chunk so much of their health off. But there's a lot to learn early on when it comes to managing combat. I think that there's so many familiar systems in this game that right away you think like, I know exactly what kind of game this is. I know what to do, but I got my butt kicked in these fights. I didn't anticipate how carefully you have to approach every fight, and sometimes you just have to sort of slow down, watch your spacing, wait for openings. And that's something that, we're not really familiar with this genre, but Dark Souls fans will like it. There we go. I mentioned Dark Souls again. I'm not a super huge Souls guy myself. The punishing combat thing, I find I don't have a lot of patience for, but what I do like about those games, and incidentally, No Rest for the Wicked, is the exploration. This first zone is like a falling abandoned castle stronghold that these, I think, bandits have just posted up in. And there's so many little secrets, so many little nooks and crannies to explore, to find treasure chests and go off the beaten path. And there's this really cool sense of interconnected level design where you'll go off in a little side path that leads you down some ladders and across a tightrope. And then all of a sudden you're back at somewhere you were much earlier, and you found this new shortcut, this new way to get around the map. And I think that's just really cool. It's really satisfying to sort of learn how to master a space that's very dangerous and intimidating at first, and by the end, you've got the run of the place. But everything's much more precision based and much more punishing than you might expect. Like, even walking across this balance beam that I fell off of, I expected some amount of like magnetism, some like way that it would stick me on this, but no, you just have to precisely walk across this balance beam and jump across this gap. There's no assist there. They're fine with letting you just fall into the ocean and try it over and over if that's what it takes. And that's kind of a bold decision. That's like gonna turn people off. To some degree it turns me off, but I do appreciate that they're not gonna hold your hand through this game. It's a hard game, and they're not ashamed or afraid to just let it be a hard game, and there's an appeal to that. I think that's neat. I did make it out of the castle eventually. I killed a guy and he dropped a key, and I used that key to free a hostage, and the hostage told me how to get out. It was kind of a cool story moment. So then I made my way out to these grassy plains where I started finding some of the mutant enemies, and I just wanted to showcase one of those fights before we get to the boss at the end of the demo, because this guy is so big and his weapon has so much reach that when I first encountered him, I just ran away. I didn't think that he could be beat, or that I was in any position to take on a fight like this. It's definitely hard, and it took me a few tries. You can see how much he moves around, how much reach he has with this weapon, and it's just fights that you have to learn to progress through the game, and it feels insurmountable. But that's the Dark Souls appeal, baby. So let's skip to this boss really quick, just so I can show that. So as we approach this boss fight, just want to mention a couple things that I think are a big part of the game that I didn't really get to experience here in this demo. One is the town, Sacrament, which I mentioned before, the big hub town where you will buy your house and decorate it and whatnot. I also didn't get to experience the multiplayer at all. This is 3-player co-op. You can play through the whole campaign co-op, which I think is really interesting, especially for a game like this. And then I guess just like the crafting stuff, and especially the runes and how runes affect combat, I really didn't get a great sense of that, just sort of a taste of how runes work. But that seems to be a big part of the customization. So here he is, the first boss, and some frame rate dips here. Apologize for that. Like I said, early build. It did make this fight real difficult. I had to do it a few times. Warwick the Torn. Like the monsters that we were fighting previously, he's just huge and fast, and he has such big reach, and I think those fights are supposed to sort of teach you how to manage these enemies that are so massive. But I had trouble just sort of even keeping track of where my character was, how full my stamina was. It's just like, this isometric action RPG perspective it makes things small, and in these fights where positioning and timing matters so much. Oh, I ran right off the cliff. Let's do another attempt. I'm really curious to see if this is the kind of genre mashup that's meant to be, or if there's a reason we've never had a isometric precision action RPG before. Because, like I was saying, it's hard to keep track of what's going on screen and to get your parries off with perfect timing and to deal with this like precision-based combat when, you know, you're small, the enemies are big, things are moving quickly. I don't know, it's hard. It's hard, but I'm definitely intrigued. I'm going to be playing a lot more of it when the early access starts on April 18th. So if you like what you see here, I recommend you check it out too. I'm going to let it run to the end of this fight so you can see if I got him or not. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's the gamer, no space.